Howdy partners, and welcome to this edition of Content Spotlight, where we take and highlight a specific topic in one of our units and explain its importance and identify its broader historical connections and implications. Today I will be discussing the annexation of Texas and how the annexation would spark a war with Mexico and fizzle the détente between North and South over slavery. All next on Content Spotlight. Americans were hungry for land. The borders of the United States by 1820 stretched from the eastern seaboard to the Rocky Mountains as a result of Louisiana Territory. While the United States was expanding, the question over should slavery expand with it became national headlines. The Missouri Compromise would be the linchpin holding the nation together over the slave issue. But another issue of expansion and slavery would erupt just southwest of Missouri in the Mexican territory of Tejas, or what we call Texas. By 1823, Mexico became independent of Spain and wanted to attract settlers to its sparsely populated area of Texas. Anglican Americans jumped at the opportunity, and Stephen Austin spearheaded the migration of 300 families into Texas. With most of the settlers being farmers, they also brought their slaves into the region, and by 1830, they would outnumber the Mexican nationals living there. Tensions developed, and soon the Mexican government began putting strict enforcement on the American settlers. They outlawed slavery and would force Americans into practicing Catholicism. With the American frontier spirit in full force, they would reject such regulations, and the winds of rebellion blew against the newly claimed dictator of Mexico, General Santa Anna. By the spring of 1836, Texas won its independence and the Lone Star Republic was born with Sam Houston at the helm. The newly formed Republic of Texas did not want to stay independent for long. They looked to be annexed or added on by the United States, being that most of the settlers in Texas were American nationals. But not so fast. Both President Jackson and his successor, President Van Buren, balked at the idea of annexing Texas. While Jackson was an advocate for expansion, the delicate nature of the slave question as it pertained to the destabilization of the Union. Clearly, the nullification debate of 1832 were still fresh in the Jacksonians' mind. In addition to the slave impact, the annexation would no doubt bring on war with Mexico. The largest opposition for the annexation is going to come from the north, and the most outspoken in the camp is going to come from the old man eloquent himself, Congressman from Massachusetts, John Quincy Adams. The debate is not of the Texas expansion itself, but of the issue of slavery and upsetting the balance in the Senate, our laboratory for debate. The balance that has been protected by the Missouri Compromise. Since 1820, John Quincy received a petition by roughly 400 Massachusetts women who opposed the annexation of Texas. Women that were abandoning the notion of the cult of domesticity were influenced by women such as Catherine Beecher, sister of Harriet Beecher, daughter of Lyman Beecher, a women's rights and education activist, to petition Congress on such ideals. With the reform impulse in full swing in the North, these ideals were looking to spread west. Slavery and the Southern social system would stifle such expansion. John Quincy, being a more progressive-minded congressman of the time, took to the congressional floor and over a 3-week filibuster gave a speech. This excerpt is from June 16, 1838, and I quote, "The undersigned women of Plymouth, Massachusetts, thoroughly aware of the sinfulness of slavery and the consequent policy and disastrous tendencies of its extension in our country, do most respectfully with all our souls against the annexation of Texas to the United States as a slave-holding territory. Congress, if they wish to prevent the annexation. And I say, moreover, that I subscribe in my own person to every word the petition contains. I do believe slavery to be a sin before God, and that the reason and the only insurmountable reason why we should refuse to annex Texas to this union. While ignoring the House gag rule, Adams roused public opinion against annexation to such an extent that the Van Buren administration withdrew support from the annexation. In the end, though, President John Tyler would push annexation through, and a joint resolution of Congress to avoid a two-thirds vote. Tyler had a fear that Houston would ally himself with the British and the United States would have a European threat in the continent once again. We see here from the 1830s into the 1840s, rise with war with Mexico as a result of Texas annexation. So now let's take a look at our historical themes. While there are several historical themes that the annexation could fall under, let's look at two. First, the American identity. In the North and West, the reform impulses influence a new moral boost that has influenced the spread of abolitionism, and the institution does not hold up to the ideals set forth by the Founding Fathers in the Declaration of Independence. Most notably, paragraph 2 of the Declaration. While many Northerners were not looking for racial equality, as we see with the Free Soilers, they did, however, feel that slavery was not part of the American ethos. Nevertheless, both groups felt that the slave institution as a whole had no part in the identity of a nation that was trying to protrude democracy on a continental level. Our next theme is work exchange and technology. Southerners are going to want the institution to expand west, not so much for agricultural reasons, but more for an economic market for the investment, as University of Texas historian H.W. Brands would argue. By the 1850s, slavery was no longer profitable for the agricultural commodities, and the slave themselves actually became the commodity. So these Southerners were looking for new markets to actually sell their slaves to, and the West was that perfect opportunity. Now, as a way to cap, or as College Board likes to call it, reasoning, let's consider another time period where we can see the impact the question over the expansion of slavery and the wake of the slave institution is going to have on the United States. By 1860, the question of expansion embroiled the nation into a civil war. It is going to be this divide that is going to springboard the United States into the bloodiest conflict in our nation's history, and by 1861, with the American Civil War going to be in full. Moving forward, even after the Civil War and the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the question over the rights of African Americans are going to develop in society and culture during the era of Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and even into today. The Bingham painting will grow. So, thanks for joining us, and please check out our unit reviews, writing highlights, and of course, APUSH on the road. This is Mr. Zagari. This is your content spotlight on the Texas annexation. Keep on keeping on.